of you have been here since kanina pa. Thank you so much. At syempre ako po si Catriona Gray. At least I know awake naman kayo. So during the pageant, my final word na 30 seconds lang. Pero today, 15 minutes. Okay lang ba? Yay! Because I think the message that I have to share with you today is something that I hope that you'll take home, that you'll think about, that hopefully will make you ponder some things and go on to do great things in the future. Okay lang ba yun? Alright! Why should I? And it's about being called to service, or being called to serve in a selfish world. Now, when we come to think of service or being in service to another, I think there's a perception that it's a lowly position. I think my mic is cutting, I'll stay back here. But being called to serve is a very honorable position to be in, and it's not reserved for just a few people. It's not reserved for teachers, it's not reserved for advocates, it's not reserved for humanitarians. Being called to serve is something that we can all do in all of our circles and whatever we do in our life. Sorry naman sa mga nag-nosebleed ngayon kasi Englishera naman ako. But we grow. I love you guys too. We're in a communal world, no? Like we're all made up or are involved in communities. And I think that's something that makes us uniquely Filipino. Although I understand in other cultures, community is a cornerstone, but there's something uniquely Filipino in that we celebrate being together as a family, welcoming people into our homes. We really value community. Would you agree? Oo, diba? So, we have the term bayanihan, and we're all familiar with that term. You know it as we all come together, we unite together to give or to help others in need for a selfless motivation. In English, and sorry if this is a bit of a far-fetched word, altruism. It's like our version of altruism, which is like compassion, but it means to give selflessly without any personal gain. So if you look around today, would you agree that bayanihan is still alive? What about in everyday life? Not calamities, not when there's disasters or typhoons. Do you encounter bayanihan every day? In your schools, at homes? Do you think it could be better? I think it could be better. Because when I go about my day, or when I've talked to people about this subject in preparation for this afternoon, bayanihan is something that we experience in the aftermath of a calamity or a natural disaster, when there's a call to help, to aid, to relieve. But in our everyday life, I think that we could do better. Because I know that we see it as a big act that we need to pull ourselves to do. We need to raise 100,000 pesos plus. We need to be able to give everything that we have. But sometimes it doesn't take such a big gesture. Sometimes it can be found in the smallest of actions that can make a huge difference if we all work together. Now, wanting for there to be a betterment of bayanihan in our country, in our generation, what do you think is the opposite of bayanihan? Selfishness. I think a more relatable way to think about, I don't think people are outright selfish, because you have to understand that they have their own motives, they have their own places that they're coming from. The usual thing that I'll hear and see is, well, if it doesn't affect me directly, then I don't really care. Has anyone experienced that? It's like if it doesn't happen in my household, if it doesn't happen in my barangay, if it doesn't happen in my country, then that's sad, but... And then you end up forgetting about it. Have you guys experienced that? Doesn't that make you sad? Because it's the complete opposite of that bayanihan spirit. It's something that alienates us from each other. And I think that's something that we have to be active about moving against. But that whole aspect of trying to adapt to circumstance, because there's only so much stress an individual can take. For example, our healthcare workers. If they weren't able to adapt to the stresses or the losses that they experience in their everyday life, they wouldn't be able to efficiently do their job. So in a way, holding back on caring is a way of adapting sometimes. Doesn't make you a bad person. But speaking to that, in human nature, we're always being called to survive. And we're always called to, in human nature ourselves, to do things for our families, for the people directly around us. But here's a question that I want to ask you guys. What would happen if, for the future of this generation, if all of us just cared about the people directly in our circle of influence? Meaning, for me, example, nandito yung parents ko, jowa, my best friends, people that I care about. What would happen if each of us only cared about the people who are directly around us? How would we be able to grow to care about people in other countries who have been displaced and lost their homes? How would we be able to extend help to those who we've never even met, whose cultures are different than us, that look different than us? Do you see kind of what I'm getting at? So it takes a conscious choice, a conscious decision on our behalf, because human nature is to self-serve, it is to survive. But it takes a conscious choice and a conscious decision to be selfless. So how did I come to experience this myself? When I was younger, I never took part in any charity work. I never did any outreach. If I will admit, was born into privilege. I was able to go to a good school. I had a roof above my head. And it wasn't until I took on the role as breadwinner in my family at the age of 20 that I became overburdened with the responsibility. And it's not my parents' fault. I happily took on and assumed this role, and I know many of you here can relate that sometimes you put yourself in a position to try and do things, to be someone for someone else that you love, and that comes from a place of love. I'm being asked to hurry up. But as soon as I felt like I could no longer serve myself in my situation, because I was overwhelmed and I didn't really know what to go on from there. I had so many doors closed in my face. I was unemployed. I was looking after my parents, but I never wanted to admit the position that I was in. So instead, I wanted to just get out of my head. So I turned to charity work, which was a really strange thing for me to do. But there's a saying that I believe, to care, you need to understand. To understand, you need to experience. And so I found Young Focus, which is a charity that I'm sure a few of you are familiar with. And it wasn't until I walked through the streets of Tondo, Manila, that I experienced how the life there was very... Ang galing nyo. No, what it really changed my life, I say that in the most serious way. It was the pivoting moment that brought me to where I am today. And if some of you may be sitting here thinking, well, how can I possibly be a part of a generation that becomes a change maker? Maybe I'm just a receptionist. Maybe I'm just a student. What can I possibly do? If I may raise my position as an example. Who would have thought that a pageant queen could be a platform to have a voice to do something for other people? It's not your usual defined scenario. But that's just the point. Doesn't matter what job you have or what experience you have. You each have had such unique life experiences. You've experienced pain and loss and celebrations and wins and gains. And all of those things give you a unique perspective to be able to speak encouragement to someone else who may be going through that. It gives you a unique position to be able to maybe present your pain in a way that you overcame it to help someone get through their own pain. Does that make sense? Never think that you were underqualified, because you are qualified. You are. I really hope that you grow to believe it if you don't right now, because if you won't use your position with where you are now, then who will? Who are you waiting for? What if everyone is waiting for you? We always talk about finding our purpose. And so I hope that there'll be some truth in this, that you'll realize or have already realized, or you will go on to realize, that being in service of your fellow human being is the greatest purpose that you can ever set foot into. And I hope that your voice, once you find the courage to speak it, to take ownership of it, will become someone else's battle cry. And who knows, maybe your voice could be the battle cry of this generation. And today we have a shining example of leadership and service, and I have the great pleasure to introduce this visionary leader of this great movement that we have gathered here to celebrate and be a part of today. He is the founder and chairman of the Global Peace Foundation, and he has tirelessly invested in the next generation and also here in the Philippines for the last 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm Filipino welcome to our keynote speaker. Please welcome Dr. Hoon Jin Preston Moon.